Hello students, Professor Benavides here. Let's go over part 2 of chapter 3, Introducing Lists. Here we're going to talk about changing, adding, and removing elements. Now most lists you create will be dynamic, meaning you'll build a list and then add and remove elements from it as your program runs its course. So let's go over our first example here. In this particular example, we'll talk about modifying the elements in the list. Here on line 2, we create a list of motorcycles and we put Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki in them. So this is a string data type. And then we simply print the list. You know it'll show up with the square brackets. We're going to go ahead and change the value of the first item only, and we do that using its position, its index. So the first item, as you know, using zero-based counting, is 0. Okay, so Honda right now, Honda's at 0, Yamaha is at 1, and Suzuki is at 2, at the index 2. So if I use this assignment statement on line 6, if I assign Ducati to motorcycles of 0, sub-0 here, that's going to then put in Ducati into that place, and Honda will be gone. So if we run it with the control B, we'll see the output down here below, and we see, yes, indeed, Ducati has replaced Honda. So how do we change the value? We can use an assignment statement, just like we do with variables. In this case, whatever's on the right is assigned to an element of the list on the left. Okay, so that's our first example on here. Let's talk about adding elements to the list. And we can do that with the append method. So here we have our original list, motorcycles, and we print it as usual. Let me go ahead and run it. And to add to the end of the list, we will use the append method. Now, motorcycles, the list, motorcycles, is an object. So when I put in a period, I gain access to the append method that's predefined in the Python language. I then pass Ducati as an argument to append. The job of append is to append at the very end. Okay, and this is considered one of the most easiest ways to add a new element to a list is to use the append method. So when you append an item to the list, the new element is added to the end of the list. And here we see it down here, Ducati. Since we print it again, after we do the append, we go ahead and do a print. And that is how we add using append. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to our next example. Many times what you'll do here is you'll start with an empty list. And then you'll use the append method to add to that list. Here we see how this is done. Let me go ahead and run that so we can see how this can be done to simplify things. So we start off with an empty list, and then we add elements to it with the append method. So instead of initializing the list with elements in it, in this particular case, we start with an empty list and add to it with the append. So Honda will go into index 0, Yamaha into index 1, and Suzuki into index 2. Okay, so when we print it, we see the list below. Okay, let's go to the next one on here. In this particular case, we have the insert method. And the insert method pretty much inserts at a particular location, an index. So on line 5, I'm going to go ahead and run this. On line 5, I declare my list and I initialize it to Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki strings. Then on line 7, I say motorcycles.insert. And see how it's a comma delimited argument. So the first argument here specifies the position, the index. So we're going to put Ducati, we're going to insert it. Insert does not get rid of, like what we did before, with that assignment statement. In this case, it is inserted, so nothing is deleted. So the insert method opens a space at position 0 and stores the value Ducati at that location. This operation shifts every other value in the list one position to the right. And here we see the output below, where Ducati is at position 0, Honda then is at position or index 1, Yamaha 2, and Suzuki index 3. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about removing things. So one way, and there's always more than one way to do this kind of stuff, right, is using the delete statement. So the delete statement uses an index. So on line 3, let me go ahead and run this. On line 3, I initialize my list and I set it to Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki. Then I print it so that I can see what I'm working with, right? It prints the brackets, we know. Then I'm going to use delete, or DEL, to remove the first item. I accomplished that by specifying the 0 index of motorcycles. So if I specify, if my statement says DEL motorcycles of 0, it'll get rid of Honda. So then when I print again, notice here below that I've only got 2 elements. So Yamaha has been shifted then to index 0. Suzuki is now at index 1. That's one of the ways. Now, this is a permanent delete, right? So after the delete statement is used, you can no longer access the value that was removed. Okay. Let's contrast that with pop, the pop method. Okay. The other one was referred to as the delete statement because of the syntax that it had, right? And in here, because of the syntax, we're going to be calling it a method. Control B to run this, and let's look at the code. So removing using the pop method. So the pop method removes the last item in the list, but it lets you work with that item after removing it. The term pop comes from thinking of a list as a stack of items and popping one item off the top of the stack. In this analogy, the top of a stack corresponds to the end of a list. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this. But before I do that, let me go ahead and say, remember, using the pop method, well, let's go ahead and go over the code. So line 4, I initialize my list. Line 5, I simply print it. Fine. We're just setting the stage. Then I say motorcycles.pop, and look at what I'm doing here. On line 7, I'm assigning that value, Suzuki, to a variable called popped_motorcycle. This is an assignment statement. Line 7 is an assignment statement. I'm popping Suzuki, because it's the last one on the list, and I'm putting it into this variable called popped motorcycle. Then simply I go ahead and print motorcycles again to verify that Suzuki is gone. It is. And then I print the variable. So what I'm asking right now is that we be very clear about that. On line 9, we're printing the list, but on line 11, we're printing a variable. So on line 11, what we're doing is we're proving that we still have access to the value that was removed, in contrast to the delete statement, where we really, get rid of it. Okay. Let's talk about here popping the last item on here, and we can use the pop method to print a statement about the last motorcycle bought if you want to do it that way. I'm going to run it. So we're using an F string here. Let's just go top to bottom. Line let's get more viewing area of the code. So on line 4, we go ahead and declare our list. We print the list. That's done just to make sure we see what we're working with. Then on line 8, I use the pop method to pop the last item, and I assign it to a variable called last owned. Very similar to what was before, except now we're making a statement, and we're using an F string, and we're putting in the variable into an F string and formatting it. So I go ahead and prove that it's been removed on line 11, and on line 14, I create my formatted string to access that variable that was popped, and I use the title method on it. So here we see the output. We see the original list followed by the list that had the last item popped, and then I used that last item to create a sentence. And the sentence says, the last motorcycle I owned was a Suzuki. So this just reiterates the fact that you do have access to it, in contrast, to the delete statement. Okay. You can also pop from any position in a list. Let's go ahead and run this. So here, line 4, I declare my list and initialize. I print it. Then I pop out the first one. You see, if I just do pop by itself, like we did over here, pop by itself on line 8 gets the last one. But if I want a very specific one, I use the index value. Now this particular case, since it's a method, we pass the index value into the parenthesis. Don't get that mixed up with, we use square brackets to initialize the list, but methods use parentheses to receive arguments. So we're saying, hey, at index 0, go ahead and pop that item element and assign it to a variable called first owned. So I'm getting Honda, right, in lowercase, and I'm putting it in first owned, and I'm printing the list again to verify that Honda's gone from the list. And you can see here below, I have 3 items, and then I just have 2, and Honda is missing, and then I create my statement to prove that we still have access to the value that was removed. Okay, so that is popping an item from any position in the list. So you can use pop to remove an item from any position in the list by including the index of the item that you want to remove in parentheses. Remember that each time that you use pop, the item you work with is no longer stored in the list. If you're unsure whether to use the delete statement or the pop method, here's a simple way to decide. When you want to delete an item from a list and not use the item in any way, right, use the delete statement. If you want to use an item as you remove it, use the pop statement. Okay, so let's talk about removing an item by value. Go ahead and open up a few more spaces over here. So we're going to remove an item by value. If you only know the value of an item, see, before we were using the index values, but let's say that you only know the name of the motorcycle, right? So that's when you would use the remove method. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. On line 3, I initialize my list, got 4 of them, I print, right? Motorcycles, let me go ahead and run this. Yeah, there we go. Got 4 of them. And then I go ahead and remove, I say motorcycles dot remove, and I pass Ducati as a string. That argument then, so what happens here is that the remove method will go and remove Ducati from the list. So that when I print the list again on line 8, I prove that Ducati is in fact gone. So you can also use the remove method to work with a value that's being removed from a list. Let's remove the value Ducati and print a reason for removing it from the list. Let's go ahead and see that in this next example. So in this next example here, I've got 4 motorcycles. I print it. Then I go ahead and I assign Ducati to a variable called too expensive. And then I go ahead and remove Ducati. This, practically the same thing, right? But I'm assigning that to a variable. So I say on line 8, I say motorcycles.remove, and I pass the variable too expensive. And then on line 9, I go ahead and print the list again, and I notice here on the output that Ducati is in fact missing. So here I go ahead and create an F string, or formatted string, and instead of just using the print function to get a blank line here, I'm using the escape code of \n. So what \n does is it gives me a blank line. So let me go ahead and run it. I think I did already. So you see, a Ducati is too expensive for me. That's the sentence. So remember, when we're creating a formatting string, we create these little placeholders. And in these placeholders, we can put a variable, or we can access the value of a list by using the index value. Okay. So one thing that we need to be aware of about the remove method is that it deletes only the first occurrence of the value that you specify. So if you had more than one Ducati here, it would get rid of the first one. If there is a possibility the value appears more than once in the list, you'll need to use a loop to make sure that all occurrences of the value are removed. And we'll cover loops in chapter 7. Okay. So that's the last one on here. Now we're going to go ahead and look at the try it yourself, or the exercises in this second section of your chapter 3. So let's zero in on exercise 3.4. I'm going to go ahead and run that right away. It's called guest list. So if you could invite anyone, living, deceased, to dinner, living or deceased, right? Who would you invite? Make a list that includes at least 3 people you'd like to invite to dinner. Then use your list to print a message to each person inviting them to dinner. Okay, fine. So what I do here is, and I embellish it a little bit, because you want to learn a little bit here. So my guests, line 4, I have I go ahead and initialize my list called guests. Remember, all lists should be plural. And then we put the elements, okay, for this list inside of square brackets. In this particular case, where this is a list of string data type, right? But it could be numbers, it could be Boolean or anything. So I go ahead and print it. So I go ahead and have Guido van Rossum. You all know who he is. He's the one that, created Python. Jack Turner, I had to look him up. I didn't know. I mean, he's an author. Excuse me, an actor. And Lynn Hill, she's a famous, well, apparently I didn't know who she was, a rock climber. So I can see how the author of your book would like Lynn, because I think he does that kind of stuff too over there in Alaska. So, but anyway, after I go ahead and create my list, I simply print it. I did something strange here on line 5. I just wanted to see if I could get away with it. I used a comma to put another line of code on the same line. So your book doesn't talk about that. I just was trying to see what I could get away with. The book likes to use the escape codes rather than using a print function to have a carriage return line feed. Let's see, like say for example, if I didn't, to run this, you'll notice I have my list is shown, and then it says Guido van Rossum, please come to dinner, and then Jack Turner, please come to dinner, and Lynn Hill, please come to dinner, right? So if I get rid of this, how else could I do this, right? I could go ahead and come right here, and right in front of the placeholder, I can do \n, and that's the way we're taught in our book, right? I just wanted to just do it a different way, apparently that comment didn't seem to offend. I would have thought that that would have been a syntactical error, but it didn't offend. You want to take things back to the way they were, I'm going to do a Control Z, and I'm back to the way I am. And when you run, it saves. Okay? So you typically don't have to like save and run, or save and then run. You know that you've edited the code. Probably should have mentioned this before. If you've edited something, you have a little symbol here, a round symbol, that signifies that it hasn't been saved yet, right? And then Control Z is just a way to go back in time. So that is exercise 3.4. What we did here is we went ahead and we extracted the first guess, and we added made it a title, and we assigned it to a variable called name, and then I simply used it as in a string. That variable was then put in here. Could I have just put this whole big old line in here? Yes. Let's go ahead and try that. Hopefully I'm not. So if I go ahead and get this and put that in here. Oh, but then I wouldn't be able to use. I would have to do that on all circumstances, right? Yeah. Oh, not really, because then the other one would have the variable there. Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and try that out. Control B. And yeah, it works. Yeah. So and then the next line of code would then take the second item in the list and assign it to name. So in this particular example here, we're using a variable to hold the return. So this is a return statement, or excuse me, an assignment statement on line 10. We're assigning whatever is in the second element, which is Jack Turner, and we're putting that in name. And then I'm using the placeholder to access name. And I do this again. You know, so well, why don't I have to? I'm reusing the variable name. I can, because if I reused it, I'm putting something else in it. If I would have had the print statement separate from this, then I would have had to have like name 1, name 2, name 3. But this is a pretty good way, in the way that it's being done in the book like this is a pretty good way to go ahead and handle it on here. So we're using a list to print messages to each person and invite them to dinner. Pretty easy. Now let's go to the next one on here. And it's a lot of code, so I have to like collapse a whole lot. And in this particular one, exercise 3.5, changing the guest list. And some of these exercises get a little hairy. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to go over, you know, all of them, but I'll try my best. So you just heard that one of your guests can't make it to dinner, so you need to send out a new set of invitations. You'll have to think of someone else to invite. So you start with exercise 3.4, and you add a print statement, add a print call at the end of your program stating the name of the guest who can't make it. Well, instead of reading all the stuff on here, I'll just show you what I did in the code. So on line 5, I declare and initialize my list, and I print it out. Then here, I access each one of these people, and I say, hey, come to dinner, hey, come to dinner, hey, come to dinner. Then I say, hey, the second dude, Jack Turner, the actor, can't make it. So then what I do, if he can't make it, I use the delete statement to go ahead and delete him. And then on line 20, I use the insert method to insert Gary Sider. I don't know who he is. I'll have to look him up. He gets placed in the same place where Jack was. So then we print the invitations again. So what is it going to say? It's going to say, hey, you know, Guido, you know, Ron Rossum, come to dinner. Hey, it's not going to say Jack Turner, right? It's going to say Gary Snyder, right? And then it's going to go ahead and say Lynn. Let's go ahead and I think I ran it, but let me. That's the code. Let me show you the output on here. So we go ahead and print out the list. Then I just say, hey, each guy come to dinner. Then Jack Turner can't make it. And then I use that insert method. Actually, you do two things, right? We have to use we use the delete statement to go ahead and get rid of Jack. And then we use the insert statement. And notice how the insert statement is, has two arguments. It's comma delimited, right? It's got a one argument here and then another argument. So what's going to happen here, this insert method is going to go ahead and insert Gary Snyder into position 1. Okay. Not position 0, not position 2. Okay. Probably should have printed the list again, just to see what was in the list. So we could do something like this again, so that we can see what's in the list. Okay, so Control B. And we're printing it, here we see that the list has Gary Snyder instead of Jack Turner. I know we could have told that by the sentences that were being made, but I wanted like this raw proof that it was done. All right, let's go to the next one on here, 3.6, and they get kind of elaborate. Lots of little things to do here. More guests. This one was funny. You just found out found a bigger dinner table. So now, what a contrived problem, right? So now more space is available. Think of 3 more guests to invite. Okay, so let's just go through the code on here. So I've got my list. I initialize it on line 4 and I print it. Then I tell them to come to dinner. Come to dinner. Come to dinner. Come to dinner. 3 guys, right? Yeah, I know Lynn's girl. I say 3 guys. Then Jack says he can't come, right? Sorry, Jack can't come. Then I delete and I insert Gary, right? And then I just go ahead and mention the new guy's name. But then here is where the big change happens. We got the bigger table. And we're going to have to, we're going to think of 3 more guests to invite. Okay, and they want us to use insert and append methods in a particular way. So it's use the insert to add 1 new guest at the beginning of the list, use the insert method to insert 1 new guest at the middle of the list, and use the append to add 1 guest at the end of the list. Picky, huh? So we do that with the index. Index 0 inserts Frida, the Mexican artist, right? And then I'm gonna have to look this guy's name up. I don't recognize it. Reinhold Messner. I wonder if he's an artist also, but I know Frida was an artist, And so Reinhold is going to be inserted into position 2. And then you all know that the append method appends to the very end. Okay? So it'll be on the last. So when we print the list again, we're going to need to see Frida in the middle. Excuse me, Frida in the beginning, number 1. Then we're going to have to see Reinhold in the middle somewhere, and Elizabeth at the very end. Elizabeth Petrovich. Sounds familiar. I probably should know that one, but it's not coming to mind. So there should be 6 people in the list. This is a great exercise on using the index. It starts at 0. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me go ahead and run this. I think I did, and then let's look at what we got. We really only need to look at the very end of this. So yeah, Frida is in the beginning. Reinhold somewhere in the middle. Because of the number, it can't be like exactly there. And then Elizabeth is at the very, very end because append appends to the end. If we had another append, then it would append to the end. But the insert 0 puts Frida here. Okay, so then I just go ahead and issue a bunch of little statements at the tail end here, where we say, Frida, please come to dinner, and then Guido, please come to dinner, Reinhold. We just go through each one of them, showing that we do in fact have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in this list. We ended up using the insert method, the append method, as needed in this particular case. 3.7 is our last one. You're probably saying, thank God, right? So let's take a quick look at 3.7. I think this one is kind of large as well. So your new dinner table won't arrive in time for dinner, and you have space for only 2 guests. What a problem, right? We start with the previous problem. Use pop to remove guests from your list 1 at a time until only 2 names remain in your list. Each time you pop a name from your list, print a message to that person, letting them know that you're sorry you can't invite them to dinner. So print a message to each of the 2 people still on the list, let them know that they're still invited. And then it says use the delete to remove the last 2 names from the list, so you have an empty list. Print your list to make sure that you actually have an empty list. Okay, so this is the last one. Let me go ahead and run it. And let's just look at the code first, and then we'll come to the output. So let's just go to the very end, because it's pretty much the same. The beginning, we're not changing it too much. It's pretty much the end of it that, so here I say, oh no, the table won't arrive on time. So we pop 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then here, there should be 2 people left. So we pop 4 of them, and then we have 2 people left. We show their names, and then we go ahead and delete them, so that when we print this, we're going to end up with just the square brackets to prove that when you print the list and there's nothing in it, you have the square brackets. So let's look at the code. So we got the sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we go ahead and then sorry, we go ahead. Oh yeah, here we go. Sorry, we can only invite 2 people to dinner. So then we go, sorry to Elizabeth, sorry Lynn, sorry Gary, and sorry Reinhold, right? So that's the 4. So we end up with Frida and Guido, because they were, because when you're popping at the end. So we're getting rid of Elizabeth, then we get rid of Lynn, and then we get rid of Gary, and then we get rid of Reinhold, right? And as we're getting rid of them, we're issuing the statement. Sorry, Elizabeth, sorry, Lynn, sorry, Gary, sorry, Reinhold, right? So then I say, hey, Frida, please come to dinner. Guido, please come to dinner. And then I print the list again, and I verify that the list is empty. Okay? So that, my friends, is the end of the second section of chapter 3, where we discuss, changing, adding, and removing elements. Hope you found it informative and useful. Thank you.